Morning. We're going to get going. Nobody else can fit round here anyway, so you might as well start.
Yeah. So our session is Digital Learning That Works. Thank you for coming. Essentially what that means is we're taking a deep breath in the light of all the new shiny objects out there and saying, how do we get back to basics? What are the things that we can do to ensure that in the light of all of these new tools, platforms, shiny objects, types of video, we still create digital learning that fundamentally works. And I'm Rose Benedicts, the Strategic Consulting Lead, joined by...
I'm Andrew Jolly, I'm Director of Strategic Design. Together, Rose and I lead a faculty of learning designers and consultants in Leo, some of which are on stand F10, just behind us here. You will have passed our stand as you came in. You'll see that very strongly this year we're reminding everybody we're lucky to be part of Learning Technologies Group, a collection of different and entirely connected teams working to deliver learning and talent management and services and content in with the mission of driving learning and technology-enabled learning in every way. So we have a number of organisations within our group that we would call platforms and products. And a number of service organisations. So I'm not going to spend the time telling you all about us. Come and see us on the stand. But I will say, amongst these different teams, we have Gomo, who you will know very well, is delivering a very powerful authoring tool and evolving that in many interesting ways at the moment. That drive new ways of delivering digital learning that works. Preloaded right at the front as you come in, showing something very nice. They are game experts, serious game experts. Euclea, experts in governance, risk and compliance learning. And Leo, who most of you will know, boldly last year saying leading the learning revolution, and realizing then, as we told that story, that it's all about leading your learning revolution, that every client is in a different place in its journey, delivering technology-enabled learning of one sort or another. And our job is to find where that's happening and drive a transformation, building ever more powerful and more effective and more engaging, transformative learning that works in organizations. And we run from strategic thinking through technology platforms, the content that you'll all know as well for, and you can come on the stand and see, and different ways of delivering, all of which are pertinent to what we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes.
Yeah, so one of the great things about being part of Learning Technologies Group, and what Andrew and I do quite often, is we garner the knowledge from all of those different areas. So whether it's our sister company that is an LMS, or that works with diversity and inclusion, or games, or AR and VR, or different platforms for social learning, we get together with them, get their brain share, organize it, synthesize it, see what's actually going on and being done. And every year, Andrew and I come and take the results of that into this conference. So what you'll see at the conference, I'm sure, if you haven't already, is that one of the outputs of the learning revolution, right, is so many new tools and so many new shiny objects. And I'm not disparaging them. They're great. We have so many more options than we've ever had. I'm sure if you walk around, you'll start learning about the learning experience platforms, which will be a hot topic this time around. So all of these things have hype around them, right? We hear, oh, it's a social learning platform, let's get that. Or, you know, oh, look, everything can be bite-sized, let's do that. And it's time, what we're saying is, this is all very good, but let's step back from the hype and look at what it takes to really do digital learning that works, whether or not you're using these, to use them smartly. So before we begin, I have a quick question, which is, do you feel like you often have to compromise really good design to use modern tools and trends? I already heard someone give a verbal yes. That was very emphatic. So another way to think of this question is, do you have a boss or a client that gives you pressure to do something new or different or wow, and sort of putting that before the good design? Do you feel that pressure? Yes? If you respond to me, I get more animated. Yes. Okay. If you said no, come talk to us afterwards. We'll convince you that you are getting the pressure. So that's great. We hope at the end to give you a bit more confidence. So what we have to say, and what we'll do for the rest of our 30 minutes, is talk about these design imperatives.
So, as Rose says, we often find there's a hype around this show, and what we're doing is stepping back to core 4 drivers that are really strongly influencing everything we're doing at the moment. And there are different words for these that you're going to hear. So, in summary, how are we going to give people their own learning journey? How do we connect people with other learners so they can learn together? Captivating and challenging learners, absolutely something we've been doing for years, still at the very forefront of what we're driving in our learning programs. And then what we've been talking about the last few years and continue to talk about all the time is the use of measurement, but taking that a step further into driving improved journeys and outcomes. And what we are going to do is tell you for each of these what we hear from our clients and often from you, and what we do and how we respond to these.
So let's start with the first one. Design imperative number 1, give people their own learning journey. So there's 2 sides to this, right? There's the one side, which is you can actually give them a prescribed journey that's personalized, right, to them, or you can enable them to create their own journey, right? Give them all the things and let them find their own path and their own journey. And we do that for 2 reasons, right? For so that we're not wasting, right? There's this concept of waste. We don't want to waste a whole bunch, and so that you give people exactly what they need when they need it. So here's what we hear: the hype, right, is a lot around personalization and around micro-learning. So we hear personalization. Part of the hype is let's personalize based on roles. We get asked a lot, can we do, we have this set of learning, but can we do it 7 different ways for these different roles? Or whether you're new to the company, new to the role, your level of knowledge based on a pretest. And then also we hear that personalization is to make loads and loads and loads of stuff and make it very discrete so we can kind of plug it together any which way we want. And then around micro-learning, we have this giant misconception that micro-learning means it's just really short, and somehow people use the term efficient, and what they really mean is, I don't want people spending as much time to learn what they need to learn. And that's what we hear, that's the hype. But here's how we actually make it work, and here's what we actually do. It's fundamentally about using these things together to give somebody what they need, accessible when and how they need it. You can also add on here in the flow of work, or in the moment you need it, right? So we talk about that a bit. So here's, thank you, a great example. So with personalization, we talk a lot about role-based is the immediate one. This is something that we built in Gomo that very nicely shows how you can use the basics of fundamentally good design and good theory around personalization and micro-learning to create amazing journeys. So this diagnostic you're seeing on the left is not based on your role, and it's not just based on knowledge. It gets to attitude. It gets to your perceived level of competence, how comfortable you are with something. So it's getting more into the attitudinal domain and the affective domain, which is, we're finding some really interesting results when you personalize based on that, more so than on role or the level of knowledge. Thank you. I love it when people nod. Just makes you feel like you can keep going. So then after the diagnostic, with micro-learning, right, which is not about making everything 2 minutes, it's about making things discrete and in a smart way, and using the different channels you have in a smart way. So the personalized journey based on the diagnostic, so Gomo would spit out a journey that says, here's what's recommended, here's what's mandatory, and these are all different kinds of channels, so micro-learns as it would be, to build your personalized journey and recommend a path through it.
The reality is this tool would actually be spitting out specific components, channels, assets, resources, and so on.
And I wanted to give an example of just, I replaced them all so with types of channels and microlearns. So this is a great slide. Don't be overwhelmed by it, but when you look behind the curtain and see what kinds of channels, we talk about microlearning, right? We talk about using channels very smartly, making decisions about what's the best way to present something. The best way might be a paragraph in an email. The best way might in fact be an expert video. So these are, we sort of categorize them for you, but from your typical e-learning formats that we all know about, short e-learnings, everything, to live learning, to apps and resources and virtual campus formats. So when we think about microlearning, we think about the different channel, not just taking something in its channel and making it shorter. So this is an example. We're doing this with clients whether on their own platform or not. So this is a great example where a client came to us and said, we have this platform, we need to do it. But we were able to put the journey with all of its pieces into the client's own platform. And then this next example shows the simplicity of design. So this is sort of further view in. The simplicity of designs are very clean, very simple, very, very small pieces, but they cling together and form this holistic journey based on seriously where that person is and what they need.
I'd say that we've always got a way to go on the journey, but to come back to what this is all about, this is about design imperatives. We are always sitting down thinking, how are we going to personalize this journey? How are we going to get away from one-size-fits-all sheep-dip learning journeys? And I feel like since we last stood up last year here, we have far more evidence of being able to actually do that, whether it's diagnostics like this or developing even smarter adaptive learning pathways with clients right now. It is something that we're seeing happening. It is no longer a wish, if you like. So similarly, connecting learners with each other so they can learn together. Again, Rose and I stood up last year and said social learning is something we're going to be thinking about hard, and we are thinking about hard. And indeed, that is absolutely something that's happening happened in the last 12 months since we saw you all. What do we hear though? We hear clients saying or thinking that social learning is in fact a platform or something they can buy, and when they've got it, it'll be fine and it'll all work. We hear, we don't want to do that, we're really scared, moderation is vital, we don't want people having the kind of conversations we don't want them to have. Certainly in some sectors this is absolutely important. And them saying the conversation must be right, which kind of gets away from the whole principle of allowing people to share and develop their reflection on what their learning experience is. And also we hear people saying, well, they'll come together online anyway, they're doing it, just give them the space, it'll happen. What do we do? How do we make it work? Well, social learning, I will come back to this, is about how people learn from and with each other. It is not about a platform, it is not about a tool, it's something that we've been doing for years and years and years, thousands of years, obviously. But we develop it through face-to-face, through webinars, through really well-constructed virtual classrooms, and through cohort-driven learning programs and open forums and so on. Moderation is vital in some circumstances. It's absolutely critical if you work in the finance, legal, risk areas. But groups will moderate themselves if you're working with a small group in a cohort. So if we're taking a group of 8 or 16 or 32 people even through a piece of learning, blended learning, and we give them tasks and we give them small group exercises, they will moderate and manage professionally that space every time, okay? Where we can, we would have tutors getting involved and supporting that team, but it is not necessary. People behave exceptionally professionally, especially when they're engaged to learn and move through their learning journeys. People will connect. Yes, they do. We all connect with each other all the time and we learn from each other in our own way. But give them a reason for it to happen, and it will happen the way you need it to happen as well. So this is about designing scaffolded learning journeys, which we are also doing. So social learning is not about a tool, it's about what people do and how they learn. But just so that you know why it's so powerful on a couple of other levels. When people get engaged and start sharing and reflecting with each other, they take ownership and they engage with the learning story in a much more deep and important way. We use the term shared sense-making a lot. They are developing relationships with each other and trusted relationships, and they're building the confidence amongst the group as they go through a learning journey. They're giving each other an immense amount of support. We develop programs that for MBA level learners that take 18 months, but we have 99% completion rates. And one of the reasons why, when we did surveys afterwards, was that people were working in cohort groups And even when they got back after a whole day at work, 10 hours at work, and they came back and had to do 3 hours of learning in the evening, the reason they did it was because they didn't want to let down their colleagues in a social group. Social learning allows you to apply a level of local understanding, context, practice and application that you may not get from central learning design as well. And as I said before, one of the key things is design scaffolded journeys. You can't expect learners who have never done this kind of sharing and learning together, because they've spent the last 15 years learning digitally on their own, to suddenly understand how this works. So think about their first steps into this area, and if you want some more some views on that, come and talk to us on the stand afterwards. I always really like this example, and Rose does too. We wanted to put it up. We did some learning for the health service, for leaders in the health service a few years back. And one of the things that we put up within the blended learning journey was a lovely poem about, from the point of view of a patient speaking out to the nurse. And we used this as part of the training for leaders in healthcare. And what we found on one of the forums was this: somebody had found a response to that poem written from the point of view of the nurse, and this generated so much kind of response from that team. It was, you know, people get creative, they start creating their own journeys.
Hundreds of responses.
Figures from last year show that these are some of the initial figures that we had from platforms that we are running and managing, to show that this is happening, and it's happening in a really, really powerful way. But just in case you think that when I'm referring to social learning, I'm only referring to social networks and conversations, of course the secret component of social learning that is really happening properly now is virtual classrooms, and people managing those really well. And most of our clients are now much better at creating truly engaging virtual classrooms, webinars that get people learning together and sharing their learning journeys as well as part of a blend.
Yeah, learning being just like social learning is intrinsically human, right? That's just how we do it. And so you have to remember everything Andrew just said, even in the face of those tools. Thank you. Design imperative number 3, captivate and challenge learners, right? So this is about emotion and perhaps what you would call engagement. So what we hear is gamification scenarios in VR and AR.
So we talk about this all the time as well. Captivating and engaging learners is really important, and we can do it in so many different ways now. It's great to be able to say gamification is now normal. It's a normal way of thinking about things, and games in learning have an important part. What we hear is, well, give scores, give points, and it'll be fun. Okay? It's not necessarily true. We hear people saying scenarios, it's all about stories. Training's better with stories. And we have people talking to us and saying, we want to do VR AR. We say, why? And they say, because it's new and therefore it must be better. How does it work in practice? Gaming, gamification. Gamification's great. Yes, if you can just put a little edge on more traditional learning delivery and make it slightly more exciting to engage with, fine. But don't think that that is part of the learning experience. That's part of the engagement experience. True game design and using game design properly is about using mechanics that support that learning. I'll show you what I mean. Scenarios, yes, stories are a massively important part, stories and narratives, of what we do in our learning design. But make sure they're authentic and make sure they get to the heart of the wicked problems.
Way easier said than done. I mean, how many of you have gone through a scenario and you get to the multiple choice part and you're like, well, this answer is really obvious. These distractors were terrible, right? Lots of nodding. So it's about really getting to that nuanced edge that gets to the real humanity of the issue.
VR and AR. VR, you'll see much more around this room here today. The important thing is to really present things that are difficult to experience in real reality. Use VR for what it's good for. It's not just a piece of eye candy, despite the fact that you will see lots of lovely stuff around here. Think hard about what it's doing, and think hard about what it's going to be able to do very shortly as well. because one of the things, by the way, I think that we're going to see in VR is the use of collaborative and creative design in virtual reality environments. So gaming, I said games have to build the mechanics in to drive genuine learning. So this is something we did with a partner in the US for customer experience in the insurance world. And although it's very simple and it's created for smartphones, it inherently has the gameplay is driving behaviors, decision making, and this is a kind of hybrid scenario game design. And there are rewards and awards and levels and so on, but deeply designed mechanics that drive better behaviors and better empathy with your customers. Scenarios, something that we've been proudly doing for many years. I always believe, and I always say, it's the killer app for e-learning, because you can take learners into places and give them situations that are hyper-realistic, that you cannot do in classroom and you cannot necessarily do on the shop floor and you cannot do in other forms of e-learning. And we often use video, but we don't necessarily need to. Creating good scenarios, by the way, scenarios are really good for decision making, assimilation of information followed by decision making, behaviors in practice, which is something we're always looking for in measurement. We want to see how people are going to behave. Consequence. Perspectives are perfect. So it turns out the scenarios are very, very powerful for human problems, for grey areas where there's no right or wrong, and so on. They also, and I have this down here slightly apart, can be good for just repeated practice, but that is another thing. And this is stepping into game design as well. Finally, VR. I said, use it for what it's good for. So our colleagues, and you'll see them on the stand preloaded, along with us, are developing something to explain how intrauterine devices work and behave. And the virtual reality environment is perfect for that, to enable people to explore and understand something that's going on inside the body. Augmented reality. This is the thing that I think will be coming, and I hope to be able to stand up here next year with Rose and say, we've got some really good examples of this. At the moment, really, genuinely, it's still about overlaying a layer of information onto another more two-dimensional piece of information, whether it's print or a poster or so on and so on. But our colleagues at Preloaded are doing some really nice stuff with plane recognition and overlaying models in the real world and so on and so on. So we're going to see some really, really interesting things happen.
I wanted to say one thing about this that's fascinating, that Andrew had pointed out. AR, as the triggers get easier and you don't have to have a specific app and you don't have to create the specific type of image, and that trigger becomes easier, you're absolutely right, Andrew. This is going to soar, especially because we all have our devices on us at all time. It's just so close to us. But if you think about good design, think about back to Gagne and his 9 steps of learning, right? 9 moments of instruction. There's a big principle in there about sequencing and chunking information in a way that's helpful and receptive to the learner, helps them build a mental model. Well, we've only been able to do that in 2 or sort of 2.5 dimension spaces. But with AR, you can actually help people think in the way you normally actually do in your brain, which is more of a 3-dimensional space. So in this case, you can pull apart sections of an organization and see how their, in this case, fundamental customer principles actually work throughout. So you can pull this apart and see in the different spaces how those principles are working throughout the organization. So it's adding that layer, which is more aligned with how we think anyway. Thank you, Andrew, for letting me jump in. I get real excited about that. It's just an original principle from the beginning of instructional design and learning design as a field, and now we can do amazing things with it. Design imperative number 4, realize value and use measurement to improve outcomes. So, measurement, we've been hearing more and more about it, right? So marketing, about 10, 15 years ago underwent this massive transformation where they said you've got to prove that it works. And in learning design, we're undergoing that same transformation. You might have we're hearing us talk about it a lot, and it's actually, I mean, the uptick and the amount that we're doing it now, it's feasible. It's no longer cost prohibitive. It's a thing that's actually happening. So let's, as we take those steps into the next big wave in our industry, keep in mind what it's really about. So what we hear quite often in measurement is, we've got a ton of content, we have a ton of learning. Not necessarily true. More boxes that are ticked means more learning has happened, or if you've passed a post-test, learning has happened. We hear that a lot. I think we all are inherently smart enough people to know that on the surface, sure, but if you dig down into the validity of those data, it's not particularly giving you anything meaningful. It doesn't actually indicate learning. But how we make it work is by measuring what you want to achieve and starting with the end in mind. In other words, you're linking the chain of evidence together from what you're giving the individual to experience all the way to what the business is, what the impact to the business is. And this chain works both ways, right? So it's about going from the reaction, has it landed, were people even able to get to it, to was there some learning or knowledge transfer, to hey, did their performance behaviors actually change? Are they doing something different? And what impact did that make on the business? So this chain, thinking of it as a chain, lets you make that logical and meaningful story both back and forth. And how this ties into how measurement works now is very much about linking learning design to measurement. So, how many of you are instructional designers or learning designers? Excellent. That was just a trick to see if you were still paying attention. But also this will ring true for you, right? You've known from the beginning of your career, right, that the first thing you go in and say is what are you actually trying to do, dearest client or boss or whomever's just come to me and asked for it, right? What heck is that? And then tell me the story from the business goal to, all right, what do people need to do to make that thing happen? What do we need to give them in order to be able to do that? And then how do we manifest that as some sort of training or support? And then measurement, which we can now do on the back end, looks at, okay, so did they actually complete it? Did they learn something? Is there evidence of knowledge? Is there evidence of behavior? And that one's kind of difficult, but the tools are there now. And this is a great moment in which the tools that are coming out are in fact worth the hype, because they're enabling us to take a look and see. And then, did that achieve the goal? So, you might know that Leo has done for the past, Leo and Watershed in combination have done for the past 3 years a survey about measuring the business impact of learning. We added a new question this last year. That new question was, do you want to use data to design more effective personalized journeys? And what we found out was pretty much across the board a resounding yes. So in the past, we've known that there's pressure. People are saying the board wants to know, right? But now, and that always came down to dollars or investment, something along those lines. But now, those of us out here sitting here doing it are saying, I want those data to be able to make better decisions. And so we're being able to design using the data and pull in the data to understand where people are. So going back to the beginning when I talked about personalization and using channels to create micro-learning that then can build into a journey smartly. We're using data to design those journeys in a more, and getting to this virtuous cycle. Something that we call zero-waste learning. That might be a new term. You might have heard of zero-waste living. Very similar. Zero-waste learning isn't a destination, right? You'll never get learning that is 100% effective and there is no single part of it you can throw away, right? There's always good stuff and bad stuff. But zero-waste learning is about embracing the attempt to get there. And by using data to get smarter over time and more efficient, in the real meaning of efficient, not just less seat time, more effective over time and a more personalized for you journey.
Perfect. So that brings the story really nicely around. You could come and see the measurement report on our stand. You can get a copy of it and come and talk to us about anything to do with measurement. As usual, it is really impossible to cover very much in 30 minutes, but just to tell you what we have been covering here, what we've tried to do is give you the design imperatives back to basics of what we're doing with these channels, these technologies, and everything we have in our power. We're giving people their own learning journey. We're personalizing wherever we can. We're connecting learners with each others. We're driving social learning strategies wherever we can. We're continuing to captivate and challenge learners wherever we can. And we're focusing very strongly on measurement and design principles that are linked to measurement strategies to not only make sure we're doing the design right now, but also that in the future we can use these technologies and any data we're getting out to design ever more powerful and effective learner journeys.
So question, do you at all now feel maybe a smidge, a little bit more confident that you can apply some of these modern trends with good design? Yes? Okay, that's at least double the hands we saw. If you're still not convinced, please come over to F10 and talk to us. Or if you have your own ideas, please, we're huge nerds. We want to learn what you're doing as well. What you hear, what you're doing, how you're thinking about it. Would love to. And then anything we've talked about, any of those 4 design imperatives or any of the tools we mentioned on our website, the resources, you can find white papers, ebooks, all kinds of examples, cases, so on, if you'd like to go in there and do some research on your own. But thank you so much. We always learn a lot by doing this every year, and this year was no different.
Thank you very, very much.